Welcome to Mediocre Gaming, and today we're talking about Anthem. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and salutations. Today, all for that loot. Let's get to it. Developers talked about legendary contracts and went through a few of the steps of what you need to do in order to complete it, as well as some details. Of course, the end result is the sweet loot that you can get from doing these contracts. So the legendary contract tells about the difficulty of the contract, and then of course, depending on what your global difficulty is and the level will determine how difficult it is for you, not to mention what gear you have on and what your javelin is rated at. So a rare javelin doing a legendary contract is going to have a whole lot more trouble than a legendary or masterworked javelin. Now, in addition, you have 6 different tiers of difficulty, starting at Lancer, then Freelancer, and then Master, and then you have the Grandmaster 1, 2, and 3 once you hit level 30. Now, one little tidbit of information that may be passed by some people: the javelins drop at level 2, 8, 16, and 26. So you don't even have your own javelin until you hit pilot progression of level 2. Something to take note of. Now, side quests or contracts can come from anywhere, and that is going to be mainly in Fort Tarsus. So you can get it from the 3 major factions: the Freelancers, the Arcanists, and the Sentinels. But you can also get it from other people, like the members of your group or random people in the fort. So depending on what you're doing or where your progression is at, you may get a contract. And as I said, legendary contracts are going to be more difficult than the other contracts because they have a higher difficulty rating associated with it. And I don't know, they didn't specifically say, but they only may come from the 3 main factions. Now, you can do it by yourself, or you can go into a group. You can matchmake, or you can bring your friends. So depending on how you want to play, you can play your way, play your play style, but just know that it will be more difficult playing solo or duo versus with a full set of javelins. Now, I believe that all javelins are going to have abilities and components that are support, defense, or offense, and those are going to be the 3 main sections. And there may be some that kind of carry over depending on what perks and bonuses they all have. So having weapon damage is going to be more offensive. Having faster shield regen is going to be defensive. The bulwark shield is more defensive. The shield that gives you a buff to weapon damage, that is more offensive. Having one that gets rid of status effects, that would be more of a support one. So a lot of different options for you to choose from depending on your playstyle and what you're trying to do. Now, it sounds like all legendary contracts come in 3 steps. So you have to go somewhere, do something, go on to another area, do something else, and then finish it off at that 3rd location. And it will be a little bit different, so it'll give it some replayability, which is not to say that it'll be repetitive. So either there are some variants or some procedural elements, so that when you take a legendary contract, it'll never always be exactly the same. There will be some differences and of course some similarities, and you can kind of know what to expect based on what faction you pick it up from. Now, they didn't go into a lot of the combat mechanics while they were going through and doing this contract, so they did not explain, or they did not try to do a lot of combos between the different javelins, or they did and they didn't really explain what they were doing. Since they've talked about it several other times previously, perhaps that was just the case, and they played enough with each other that they knew the playstyle of the other players. However, that being said, they may not have been using a lot of combos, which made the boss fights at each step a little bit more challenging than I think it had to have been. So if they talked about, I'm going to set it up for a combo, then the other people could be ready for it and then just add in that extra bonus damage. As it was, there seemed to be a lot of kind of whittling away the boss, the Ursix or the Titan, get their health down just a little bit, just ticking off just little infinitesimal chunks off their life with normal weapon fire and abilities. And it seemed like the largest chunks of health came off when their supers were available. So just looking at it on its face, they're huge bullet sponges, and you have to go in and whittle them down and then use your super to take off large chunks. Looking at the deeper mechanics, I think running with a full group, communicating with them and talking about, all right, I'm going to set them on fire. I'm going to, I'm going to electrocute them. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Set them up for those combos and just pour on the damage at those points in time. Because if he could have put his weapon damage shield up, well, I guess it's not a shield, it's more of a buff, and someone had just said, oh, I'm going to set them on fire, set up that buff, have 2 or 3 people in that buff, pour on the damage, get those combos, and I think the health probably would have come off a little bit faster. Now, they did bring up a good point that although a lot of the enemies have their head as their weak point, that is not necessarily the case for all of them. Like the Ash Titan, the arms were the weak point, but only when they were glowing. So the more difficult enemies may have weak points that are only available at certain points in time. Now, loot is always going to be a point of interest or contention depending on what side of the fence you're on. You have drops coming from the normal enemies and drops coming from the bosses. It seems like the bosses have the highest percentage chance of giving out the better loot, since the 3 Titans and the Ursix all gave out epic loot or above, and there was one, I think, regular guy that they took out and dropped an epic loot for him, which of course I don't think he did any damage on. So as long as you were in a group, you can get a drop from any of the enemies, which is good. Even if you're concentrating on one guy, you don't have to concentrate, let's say, on the boss, because you don't want to miss out on that loot. So you can actually work as a team and, someone do crowd control and, 2 or 3 people working on the boss, depending on the situation. And you don't have to worry about that one person that's working on crowd control losing out on loot from the boss. But that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to ring the bell before you leave to be notified of all future episodes as soon as they go live. And thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing, and we'll see you next time.